Members and non-members, good morning. It's Tuesday, August 19, about 9:21 a.m. Eastern. It's Flash, back with some more charts and another video. So this is kind of a members daily video that I'll give out every single day around this time, maybe a little bit earlier. And members, don't be alarmed. This is just a one-day thing, but I want to give, some other folks a taste of what they can expect with the daily membership if they do choose to sign up on YouTube. And so essentially what we do, guys, is just go over Bitcoin's daily price action and usually MSTR's daily price action. And we look at some indicators and just try to figure out where price is going. We look at liquidity, we look at gold overlays, and we try to find out, okay, is this market going to be topping, in September, October? Could it go on through through 2026, which I tend to think so. But we just try to track it. I try to chart the course, give you guys some clarity around some day-to-day price action, week to week, month to month. So if you're interested, feel free to sign up. If not, I'll usually post like a weekly video trying to recap as much as I can. But the daily video is really where I get into the weeds. So let's dive into Bitcoin here on the daily time frame. We're, have this domed consolidation in yellow, which we've seen before, right? It makes these domed consolidations, and then I've adjusted this blue channel a number of times just to kind of contain price action. It's really just for an aesthetic to see, okay, if we hold this trend, where could we go up into the future? And then if we throw on the 30-day moving average in yellow, I've also got the Ichimoku cloud here, and I've anchored a VWAP here to this low back in late June, right? So I'm just trying to find some support here. Looks like we're touching the cloud. It's a thick green cloud. We're underneath the 30-day moving average, so we want to get back above that, and we don't want to spend too much time in the cloud, right? So hopefully we can hold this bottom trend line and reverse higher to the upside, upwards to 150K is what I'm thinking. And so here we can look at some DMARC indicators. This is a indicator called TD sequential. And so this kind of tries to identify when things may be overheated or too stretched, right? Either to the upside or downside. And so it takes into consideration like counting certain candles, and you get these measurements, 7, 8, 9, 13s are usually bearish or bullish, right? So we got a bunch of 7, 8, 9s here when we made this recent high, and that kind of marked, okay, we got to let this cool off for a second. And so we're coming into a little bit of a correction here. And we're just kind of waiting for, maybe a 7 or an 8 to kind of pop up here and see if that'll mark the next local bottom. And so when we overlay M2, right now I'm using a 99-day offset, and the 30, 60, 90 average is about 64.4% correlated. And so I'm trying to be a little bit more conservative with this M2. I'm trying to match this angle of ascent with the M2 with the angle of ascent of Bitcoin, right? And so I think M2 has found its own path within this channel. I think Bitcoin will continue to kind of find its own path in this channel, but you can see here, like it really rhymes right here. There's a sharp dip, and then it works its way back up to the upside. So what I'm thinking here, and I have this red line marked out, this is part of the rainbow wave indicator. And so Leo Hart, who made this rainbow wave indicator, you can search for him on X. He uses Fibonacci time, and based on where the halving is, right, to kind of mark out where the tops usually are in the Bitcoin 4-year cycle. Now, we're trying to identify if this is a 4-year cycle or if liquidity and other macro financial conditions are going to maybe extend this cycle into 2026. So that's something I'm trying to identify and I work on every single day. Now, when we look at a gold offset, so the price of gold, I've also found a 152-day offset really lines up nicely with recent price action, right? The 30, 60, 90 average correlation is 65.1%. And, just like M2, there's a dip here, maybe a little bit out further into the future. But just like M2 is kind of finding its own path in this upwards channel, I think, gold found its own path through this upwards channel, and I think Bitcoin is obviously doing the same thing, right? So you can see gold makes a run up here and then just consolidates for a long time. When we overlay them both, again, they're telling a similar story. So this is another very crucial, I call this the command center, right? There's a lot of indicators on the screen here, but you have Bitcoin here, the yellow line is today, and then you have our little energy indicator, which is the distance percentage from the moving average. The white line is the current Bitcoin rate of change. And then this is the ADX. tells you if the buyers or sellers are in control, and if the white line is really low, that typically means there's a big move on the horizon. So this white line is still pretty low, which means I am expecting a large move to the upside or downside, but I'm favoring the upside, and I'll tell you why. So the orange line here is the rate of change of the M2, right? The green line is the rate of change of gold, right? So as long as these are positive, that means there's positive price action, there's positive momentum. Now, just because they're going down doesn't mean that you could see, the M2 and gold are both still going up because their rate of changes are positive, right? But once their rate of changes go negative, like we did back here, which you can't really see, it's cut off here, but rate of change for gold went down here. That's when you have these little dips in the M2 or in gold, right? So I've marked out some dates here. So first date is with the M2, you kind of get this last thrust, right, to the upside here. And that's Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. And so that's what I'm thinking could be a local top for Bitcoin. The red line is, you can't see it on the screen, but it's October 23rd. That's when this indicator, this red line, this indicator is marking kind of the top for that 4-year cycle based on Fibonacci time, based on the halving. And then this orange line you'll see is November 3rd, right? That's when the rate of change for M2 kind of really breaks down here. It doesn't quite go negative, but then it goes negative out here, in late November. And so you can kind of see here, these are forward-looking indicators. That's the idea, right? Can we, in addition to the overlays, can we use the rate of change to maybe identify up thrusts or down thrusts in the M2 and in gold to see if we can match that up with Bitcoin, and we can match the rate of change and the energy indicator with these indicators to see if we're rhyming, right? So it looks like M2 really falls off a cliff here, right? And that's late November. But if we look at gold kind of did the same thing. It kind of stutter stepped around the zero line and just really consolidated for 2 months. And now gold looks like it's kind of poking its head out. So we're trying to identify if gold is really leading the way before M2, before Bitcoin, right? So we'll kind of identify to see, but right now it's definitely shaky with the M2. So that's why I'm saying, I can't advise anyone to sell their Bitcoin or to take chips off the table or to go all in, right? I can just show you guys the data that I'm seeing and allow you to make the best decision for yourself. This is not financial advice, it's financial entertainment, really. So I just think this is super interesting and interesting to follow. Another thing I pointed out is, I saw this on X as well, but the COVID fractal, the March 2020 fractal, where there's a big dip here in the light gray line, and then you had the tariff fractal. Obviously that's what's playing out today, and you can't deny that these are rhyming, right? They're really rhyming pretty good, and so this is also on the table, right? We could just get this big crazy move. There may be a dip here, in October, maybe in November, right? And then we could continue going to the upside. So I'm not ruling that out, and we need more data around the business cycle, around the ISM. We got to see what the dollar does. Got to see what interest rates do, right? So there's a lot to kind of take into consideration, but this is stuff that I'm tracking every single day. And so let's dive into MSTR, right? So here's MSTR on the 12-hour. I'm not here to talk really about fundamentals. I can't talk about ATM guidance or what Saylor is doing, what the leadership team is doing. I can just look at the chart and look at the data, right? And so it's a little bit tricky, right? Because we have this domed consolidation. We kind of had a domed consolidation right here. I imagine sentiment was in the gutter here in late September, October of 2024, and then it really just shot up to the upside, right? So here's kind of what I'm thinking. And we have a 3-wave move to the downside. It looks like we have 5 waves up here, and now we're making kind of an ABC correction. Maybe it's a running flat of some sort. And so we're making a lower low, right? We're taking out these lows. We swept these lows, and I wouldn't be surprised to see price kind of come back up here to see what happens around this domed consolidation around 410, maybe 420. And then we'll see if that turns into maybe a head and shoulders look, right? That would not be ideal for MSTR holders. But again, if we go back to this slide, it really shook people out. Yeah, there's been a lot of pain in the market, but I'm not sure it's painful enough. I still think there could be further downside, but we'll see. We'll keep tracking this on a daily basis, because there's also could be another 3-wave move that maybe a lot of people aren't seeing. But this would kind of bring us to the bottom of this range. Again, it would shake a ton of people out, and then maybe we make another 5-wave impulse. So that's kind of still on the table for me, and I'm not sure, because when we look at the DMARC indicators, again, here we're on the daily time frame. We had a bunch of 7, 8, 9s here, kind of marked a local bottom, but then we made a lower low, right? If we look at it on the 12-hour, we're getting a 13. We're printing a 13, which means this is likely a local low, right? So we're gonna kind of just got to see if what happens here. And then I've also, I look at a lot of indicators. Some are helpful, some aren't as helpful. But this is if you type in Fu Manchu, Cipher B plus divergences, you can edit the settings here, and this just detects like the waves, the momentum, and it points out some divergences. And then this red and green is really the money flow. So right here, we have a divergence here. We have a buy signal, so to speak. Like this is a bottom. It goes hand in hand with the 13s that we're seeing on the screen. So again, this is kind of pointing to tell me, hey, we could kind of retest this domed consolidation up here, and then we can kind of see what happens, right? Because we also have this COVID fractal. The March 2020 fractal, I copy and pasted it with MSTR too, right? And so, maybe we do come up here, and maybe we actually break out, and we get to the top of this range, and we keep on running. So I'm leaving that on the table as well. And again, I'm just trying to follow this every day and have clarity. Really, the goal of my channel is to bring myself clarity, bring others clarity where you may not have it. So just kind of trying to bring a visual to the price action. And so last but not least, here's MSTR measured in Bitcoin, right? So this is a little bit more zoomed out. We're on the 2-day time frame, and I could zoom out even more because this horizontal line is pretty meaningful, right? So we kind of hit our heads on it. We broke out. We came down and retested it. And again, we may have like a 3-wave move here. We may still have further downside. I'm not 100% sure. But when we zoom in, so we zoom in on the 4-hour, it looks like, this is kind of bottoming. It looks like MSTR is kind of bottoming versus Bitcoin, right? We still have this big horizontal line. Well, the bigger one, right? This big one is still kind of that resistance, right? But when we zoom in, we could be starting to form a bottom, right? So we may start to see MSTR outperform Bitcoin for the short term. We'll kind of continue to track this on a daily basis, and members, you'll see me tomorrow morning, and then the next day as well, and then Friday. But just wanted to give everyone else, kind of just a taste. And then, here's MSTR measured in Bitcoin on the 12-hour with this other indicator, right? So big divergence here. We have a yellow dot, which means it's like really oversold. And in the past, you can see this led to, again, short-term outperformance, and then we'll see if we can break out of these resistance lines and go much higher. So that's it, guys. This COVID fractal, it's definitely interesting, right? It's rhyming. I'm not saying it's going to play out perfectly. I would say this is kind of our last hope. Otherwise, for MSTR, we may have a bigger three-wave move in front of us, and it could really get ugly before it gets brighter. So I'm going to keep tracking this for you guys. I hope you found this helpful. This is Flash signing off, and I'll see you members tomorrow. I'll see the public probably next week. You guys have a good day.